Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. QLPOR, as it's widely known, features a bevy of poets, spoken word artists, and live poetry readings with best-selling authors. Your host is Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the program. Tonight, my special guest is Niki Tulk. Her new book from Driftwood Press is titled Oh. In this book, Niki explores the aftermath of sexual assault, revealing profound truths around myths and folklore. Niki, let's talk. Let's talk, Niki.
Let's talk. Let's do it.
All right. Revealing profound truths about the stories we craft around violence, womanhood, and justice. I got it out. That's a lot, Niki.
You got it out. Yeah, it is.
I got it out. That's a lot.
I know. It is. You do better than me.
all serious topics. But Niki and I had an opportunity to talk a couple of minutes prior to the show, and she made me laugh, good people. So you know how I am. You know I love to laugh. So that's just part of our journey. All right. Are you ready, Niki?
I am so ready. Thank you so much for having me on. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, I'm so happy. I don't know why I'm happy, but I'm already happy. All right, here we go. What is poetry to you, Niki?
To me, poetry is the way I think I make sense of the world, and also I guess it's the way I commune with my imagination and the imagination of the world around me. I feel like it's kind of this two-way radio. You know, you kind of feel stuff, you experience stuff, and then it has to come out. And then that coming out is not just self-expression, it's a reaching out to the world, really generally, or speaking back to that imaginal stuff that got you inspired in the first place. It feels like a loop for me, and I just love it. I love the creation of it, and I love the crafting and the editing of it. They use different parts of me, but I really love the tinkering. So I'll spend a lot of time on that part of writing as well. But yeah, I love other people's poetry. I love how every poet has this completely different voice and way of seeing the world. But every time I hear someone read or I read someone's work, it's a whole. So it's a portal into something else. So I find it's kind of the one thing at the moment that gives me faith in humanity.
Yes.
But, you know, it's beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Well, it is beautiful. I want to know more about that loop that you just mentioned. Tell me more about that loop.
Oh, the loop. Man, the loop.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, it's that relationship with what inspires me with the art, which is all around me and also inside me. And then when I respond to that and put those words out there, or I do performance, if I put that performance out there, and then it lands with other people's imagination, and then it kind of comes back to me, and there's some kind of, I don't know, collective midwifery that happens. This kind of, we're all part of that creation of a piece of imaginative life that happens. I get really off on this kind of stuff because I feel there's something really important to our interconnection as people, and I see it as like I don't know, I'm going to sound really kind of hippie here, but some kind of energy loop, you know, this imagination loop. Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
That's okay. That's why we're here, to talk and share, and for me to learn new things. So thank you for sharing. Now, we've talked about what is poetry. Why do you think it's important, Niki? Why is it important?
Oh, well, I do research into trauma and trauma studies. It's another part of my life as a scholar and things as well. And I've dived into Bessel van der Kolk's work a lot, his book, The Body Keeps the Score, and a lot of his work. And he talks about trauma being essentially something that narrows our imaginative field. So we can no longer imagine multiple possibilities to things. And he uses the roundabout answer to your question, but he uses the example of, someone, if you've been attacked, right, and someone comes up and puts a hand on your shoulder, that your imagination will only give you one option: I'm about to get attacked again. And he talks about healing from trauma as being expanding out the imagination. And he says in all the treatments that you can bring, anything that's going to expand the imagination and feed the imagination is going to help people heal, because then they can have other possibilities. Maybe that was an old friend. Maybe it's a person falling and is holding onto you for strength. Maybe like all these other options that the mind can throw up again. So I feel like the importance of poetry, for me anyway, is that it feeds the imagination of the people who make it, the people who enjoy it, that it feeds this part of us that needs to be able to see things as potentially different than what they are, and to open up new ways of being in the world and thinking about being in the world.
Yes.
So I feel like poetry is a part of that.
Well, for whatever reason, that's fascinating to me. Cool. That's wonderful.
Right?
It really, really is. I like what you shared. I want to know about O. And before when I flood the opening, I was reading too fast. Niki unearths myths and folklore, revealing profound truths about the stories we crafted again, violence, womanhood, and justice. That's so much. Let's talk about O. Tell me everything.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It is so much. And part of the idea of the O, or the circle, and there's a poem about that that starts off the book, is it's an infinite loop. It's so many things. It can be zero or nothing, and it can also be infinity. And there's something about that shape as well as that letter that has these endless sort of symbols and images that it can lead into. So you're right, it's too much, and it's so much. And so I guess the book is looking at sexual assault and the survival from it through largely the eyes of a mother to a daughter, and it does so in several sections. So the first section is Big O, and it's about Ophelia. So it's riffing off Ophelia. It's not kind of about her, but it's taking this image of this young woman who is always and forever suspended between two banks in the water, drowning because some guy screwed her over, right? Hamlet. So she's there forever, and she's this weird construct, too, of what we imagine a traumatized woman to be like and what madness is like. There's so much in it. So I did a lot of work around that. So that's one section. And then there's a section called Little O, which explores more specifically, I guess, the story of the daughter. And then there's a bunch of fables which follow a kind of a similar feeling, but they're set. It's about an owl who marries a baker, and they have a daughter born to them who has talons instead of feet and a few feathers. And it's about her. She can't fit in, and she's, and the owl mother rescues her at the end when she tries to drown herself. And so a lot of it's about, I suppose themes that rose up were themes of connection and disconnection, of how difficult it is for women, especially girls, to be believed, what the system is like around issues of injustice, especially when it comes to, people who are not male or white or whatever, all the kind of spaces and places that are really oppressed in our society.
Yes.
So it's really angry book in a lot of ways, but there's also, I hope, a lot of beauty in it too, because inside that there are the moments of joy and tenderness and connection. And I hope at the end, ultimately, kind of a sense of hope or healing through the reestablishment of relationship. So
now, when you're writing, who are you having a conversation with?
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question. I think now that I was having a conversation with different parts of myself as I was writing it, because the book came out of a solo performance. So I did a solo show which I took around that I realized was about sexual assault. I thought I was making it about Ophelia, and I realized, oh, there's a lot more going on in this than I thought. And I decided to take some of the writing from the solo show and riff off it and start to write. So I began with writing about Ophelia, and then it opened up and opened up and opened up and turned into the manuscript that it is. So it came out of physicalizing sort of and conceptualizing around the idea of the young female that's constructed in a particular way, and trying to unpack that and ask questions about why we systemically create these very stereotypical little pictures of what suffering should look like, who suffers, and how they should respond. And certainly, once you start bringing in the judicial system, there are ways that you are supposed to exhibit and present as traumatized for your story to be listened to. Right. And if you don't present in those ways, then you are seen as making it up or not to be believed. And this obviously happens across racial and gender lines all over the place. This isn't, really just about sexual assault, but yeah.
Well, the word trauma can be defined so many different ways. I mean, people look at it, they just look at it differently. Tell me more about trauma in your definition of it.
Yeah, sure. So the way trauma, I think, I subscribe to how a lot of neurobiologists are talking about it now, which is essentially it's when our nervous system, so every bit of stimuli around us, we absorb into our brainstem, which is the oldest part of our brain. So everything comes first through the body, if you like. Temperature, mood, emotion, everything comes through there. And then it comes up through what we call the insula, which is a part of the brain, the amygdala, and other parts where you become aware that you're feeling something. And then that group of bits of your brain pass it on up to the prefrontal cortex, where you hope that part of the brain makes meaning and context out of what you're going through. So that's the way that bad things happening should be processed. You feel it, you become aware that you're feeling something, and then your prefrontal cortex goes, oh, this is the context for it, and integrates it. So that's how we're kind of designed to work. And when something's traumatic, what it means is we get so much stimuli coming in that it overruns that first level of the nervous system, and it just shuts down. Everything else goes offline, and all those feelings stay kind of locked in that part of the brain, in the limbic system, and our bodies hold it, and it never goes up through these other bits that would help us process what happened. And that's not a fault of the brain. It's like you fill up a bath, and if you keep that tap running, it doesn't matter how good your bath is, that water is going to go over the edge and flood everywhere. And that's not the bath's fault. It's just got too much water going into it. And it's like that. So that can be anything. That's relative, right? That can be developmental. The child's growing up. They don't get picked up when they cry enough. And so they go, oh, I'm not safe. It can be that. It can be, what we call the big T traumas, rape, war, all that kind of thing too. But I think the definition is very broad, and there's no hierarchy in a sense, because every person's nervous system can handle a certain amount. So when your nervous system is overwhelmed in that way, and your brain can't process it because it was too much, too fast, then that's when trauma can kick in, unless that person gets a lot of help afterwards to process that. But that's generally how it works. So it's very visceral, it's very in the body, trauma. And so I think I explore a lot of that in the book. And
yes.
I think so I think that would be my, there you go, you get the scholarly definition because.
hey, it sounded fantastic. I mean, I was hanging on every word, to be honest.
Oh,
I really was.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I want to take a class from her.
Oh, so fascinating.
Niki, please share a poem.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Okay, so this is, all right, so I will start with the first part. There's some fables at the very start. And so this kicks off part one, which is a fable. So that's where we start. So I thought I could read that one. A weary traveller came to an inn and, on finding it full, climbed up a tree. Before long, a bird came to her and promised her the whole sky for breakfast if she would only exchange her human feet for the bird's wings. It was a business transaction, pure and simple. The woman pondered, and as she pondered, she noticed the tree felt strong, the leaves felt like fur. The traveller had never felt so safe, the world beneath like a river. She said yes. The bird left. A storm came and enveloped her. The traveller fell into a deep sleep. The next evening she awoke, and the air was calm. Arms were feathered. Resting beneath her pelvis, 2 claws. The end.
Wow.
That's how it opens.
That's how it opens.
To a different world.
Well, would you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Read that again. I'd love to. I want to hear it again. I want to soak it in. Read it again for me, please.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. A weary traveller came to an inn and, on finding it full, climbed up a tree. Before long, a bird came to her and promised her the whole sky for breakfast if she would only exchange her human feet for the bird's wings. It was a business transaction, pure and simple. The woman pondered, and as she pondered, she noticed the tree felt strong, the leaves felt like fur. The traveller had never felt so safe, the world beneath like a river. She said yes. The bird left. A storm came and enveloped her. The traveller fell into a deep sleep. The next evening she awoke, and the air was calm. Her arms were feathered. Resting beneath her pelvis, 2 claws. The end.
Hey, you sound like something on Audible, where you're listening to a book. Perfect. What is the? I mean, you're great. What is the relationship between your speaking voice and your written voice?
Oh, intimate, absolutely intimate. I think when I'm writing, I'm moving it. I'm speaking it. It feels like the breath comes, and I can feel the music of the words and where it needs to go. And because some of it, that piece actually was in the solo show too, so it came out of riffing and moving in the studio and developing it that way. And then the other bits that were written at a desk or on my bed or wherever I wrote them still carried that. Like I feel it in my body. They're very connected. So, and I also really love reading aloud, like something I go into this. I don't know. But it's my own. I just love it. Oh.
Well, let's go back in time. In your past, what was an early experience where you learned that poetry had power? Where did you learn it had power?
Oh, you ask the best questions. They're really good.
That's why they pay me the big bucks, Niki.
That's right. Oh my goodness. Oh, I think I loved, okay, this is going way back, but I loved Dr. Seuss. I loved the Lorax. I don't know if you read the Lorax, you know, that little creature that pops out of the trees, and at the far end of town where the grickle grass grows and the wind smells slow and sour as it blows, and nothing ever sings except the old crows, is the street of the lifted Lorax. And why was he listening? And it goes on. And that, I remember that as, I think, probably the first time I had something read aloud to me that completely took me into a world. And part of that was, it was the rhythm and the rhyming of it, which I just loved. So that's probably the first bit, was Dr. Seuss.
Wow. That's fantastic. Please share another poem. Share another poem. Please share another poem.
I will. Pages on. It was near the end of twilight, tree and bird drenched with dark, her feathers thin, more a membrane, eyes turmeric gold as with all owl eyes, whirring in the gathering gloam. Watch for the scuttle of tiny feet, the prickle of mouth, the scramble of mole, the owl and thin carving of moon, hiss of nearby sea. The end. And that's one of the little bits of her life.
Mm-hmm. Explore a little bit more for me. What is the purpose of that poem?
I think showing her life as an owl, there's a sense that there's that sort of descriptive bit at the start of what happens to her, and then the language becomes a little, not totally more fragmented, but a little less human. So that instead of it kind of reading a bit more like a story, sometimes the sentences run on, or I pull out the verbs, or it's got little jolts and jars to it that are slightly edgy. So I think it's expressing her new life, but in a way that's still fably, but a bit more dreamlike, a little bit more fragmented.
Wow, very nice. When you write poetry, are you writing it for yourself or for the reader?
I think I write for both of us. I think I'm always imagining that someone is listening. It always feels like a community act for me. And I think that community starts with different parts of myself or with the material, but I always feel the readers there, almost like ghosts. And then as the poems start to develop and I have a stronger sense of what they're going to be, the reader feels stronger as well. And then when they feel ready, I then want to get them to meet each other.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. How long did it take you to write O?
Oh, I reckon it took over a year. I think it was hard to write the stuff that, we'll have some more chances to read a bit more over the show, but as it kind of digs in a bit more, that it became harder to write because it was getting a bit more raw. And I had to kind of unpack, I guess, the fables a little more. So that was harder. And I think then the editing was hard. I love the editing, but I can get too slash and burn with things. So I had to kind of do a little bit and then give it some space and then do it again so that I didn't, and then keep reading it aloud. And then I'd take stuff to the studio and I'd move it just so I wasn't letting that just one part of me, edit it. I thought it's still got to work for the voice and it's still got to work for these things. So it took a while, and I still get obsessed with the letter O. Like, I don't think I'm quite finished with the letter O yet.
Oh wow! Wow. Well, let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good.
Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with the incredible Niki Tulk. Niki, all great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them great in your eyes?
Oh, okay. Oh, so many. Oh, my goodness. I think Janet Frame is a big one for me, a New Zealand writer who, Jane Campion made a really cool film about her, but she was in a mental asylum, wrongly died 8 years, and then was allowed out. Yeah, the day before she was going to have a lobotomy, her work won this major award, and she thought she was going to lose her brain, and then she got this award, and they let her out, and then she traveled the world and became this really amazing author. Oh, her story is unbelievable. And she's just a wonderful writer, and I think I've learnt so much from her phrasing and because she'd been seen as mad and been cooped up in this 1950s asylum for so long, her language sort of was very porous. It seemed to kind of move between these realms of what the world might call sane and what the world might call mad, and she kind of very ironically moved between these ways of writing. And she has this great quote. I actually wrote down, because I love it so much, all writers are exiles wherever they live, and their work is a lifelong journey towards the lost land.
Oh, wow.
I know.
That's truly
yeah,
right.
Isn't it? I know. I have it on my email signature. I can't get enough of it. So if I email you enough, you're going to see this quote a whole lot of times.
Okay. All right. I want you to email me too.
Yeah, I will. But,
Anybody else that was a favorite? That's a favorite.
Cecilia Vicuña, who's a Chilean, an indigenous Andean poet who does incredible spoken word stuff where she moves into kind of chanting and she does a lot of ecological and gender-based violence sort of healing with her words. Joy Hayo, the poet laureate. June Jordan, I love her stuff. Galway Cannell, his Book of Nightmares, just incredible. Oh, there's so many. But I think probably from a range, I think I love the urgency of June Jordan's work, and it just, all her poems feel like they come straight out of the solar plexus, just like boom. They're so raw, but they're so well crafted, and there's a kind of a disciplined urgency in her work that I really love. And Cecilia Vicuña's stuff is just so magical, and it's very fable-ish, and she moves from legends, and she sort of half sings her work, and as she performs, she winds people around with unspun wool, because in her culture, unspun wool was what the cosmos was woven from. So she weaves people together, and she does cool stuff, like she weaves the sides of roads together and sides of rivers together in symbolic actions of weaving healing communities. She's really amazing. So, yeah, all those huge influences.
I like what I'm hearing. Yeah. Share another poem.
Yes, I would love to. Okay, so this is the next section, which is the big O, which is, so kind of going chronologically through the book. O knows that the sheets are clean only when you beat them on rocks. She watches the women flay laundry by the river. The women sing as they work. Bury him, low in the ground, where the worms will eat his hands and his fingernails will stop growing. Excavation is not a crime. Crime is not excavation. Who laid him in the cold earth? Will they also lay her? O thinks of their questions. Their questions think her. How many times, here is O's question, can you tell one story, and each time that story gets whiter until there is no stain? There is no stain, no proof, no evidence. In her mind, O crushes cloth against stone, again, again, again. The end.
as you think about your body of work, your poems, has a poem that you've written ever humbled or frightened you?
Oh, I think they've all frightened me.
Okay.
Once, pretty, funny, happy, jokey person, and
yes.
I love laughing.
I picked that up.
And yeah, right. And then I write this work, and it's so sad and sometimes really savage and really angry, and sometimes that. But I was really nervous with this book coming out into the world because I'm like, oh wow, it's really, sharp, and there's a lot of anger in it and a lot of pain in it, and then the caretaker in me goes, I don't want to launch that on the world, it's a laugh. But so I think all the poems in this book, I think little think of another one that I might have done. Oh yes, I wrote a couple of poems when we first moved to the States. I lived in Athens, Georgia, and
okay, did you now? All right.
I sure did, and that was a big shock to the system because
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, so many levels, and one of them being we got taught in Australia is that after Martin Luther King Jr., everything got fixed, and it didn't.
Oh wow!
So there was just so much. I think the racism that I found. I mean, there was a lot of beauty and storytelling and stuff as well, but I was really shocked at many, many levels of injustice that I didn't expect to see, and that got me really pretty turned up. And also seeing connections between things about Georgia and Australia and Australia's treatment of Indigenous folks and ongoing mistreatment of Indigenous folks that really got me thinking of what I had just not noticed, because where I was, I knew one Koori person, and they looked almost like me, and I hadn't had to, through my own privilege as a white person in Australia, had to bump up against this stuff. It's also different. Racism looks very different in Australia than it does in Athens, Georgia, and I think that really shocked me a lot. And so the poetry that I wrote, 2 poems that came out of that was the first time I think I'd written anything really savage about my own country, about what I was seeing with Georgia and myself. So
would you read them? I mean, I'm waiting with bated breath. I want to hear them.
Oh yes, let me find it. They're kind of, they're out there. And
well, I want to say this really quickly too. I really appreciate your honesty. I really do. It's refreshing. It really is. I need to share that from the heart.
Yeah. Oh, that's really. Thank you. That really means something to me. I'm trying to find this. Where is it? Oh, I'm just trying to find.
That's all right.
Where it is. Here we go. All right. Just need to find which. All right, I won't bring this up. I'm going to see. All right. This one is called Georgia Prayer, and I think it ended up getting published in the Rock River Review, this one. All right. So apologies to any Georgians out there, but I did love a lot about Georgia too. So, okay, this one's called Georgia Prayer. Again, I drove too far in the wet heat, past a burning car, flames, hot gold against black Chevy, down Highway 316, straight as a judge's spine from Athens to Atlanta. Oh, the fierce transience of a red-rimmed road, chicken trucks and pickups, shoulders trimmed with dead raccoon, armadillo, hulk of brown deer, fast food carrion. The peanut lady, teeth all crooked, calls her wares. Hot boiled, stop once, honey, stop by again. On the 316, Baptist billboards point the way. turn right at Lou's Soul Food and Fried Chicken, left at McDonald's and only 200 feet to being saved. Others shake their snake language down on the railway tracks on Sundays, forearms shiny. On God's own highway, obese billboards block blue sky. Direct cremation, why wait? And here, and hail, you benevolent billboards, the service you deserve, and being used never felt so good. While in their scaffold shadow, a wilted man clasps cardboard, will work for food, left leg trembling, eyelids mute slits pressed tight by the white sun. Being used never felt so good. Sun so thick and May through September, heat congeals your skin, turns sold, soft like grits, slow and gold. Oh, Georgia, Georgia, Georgia on my mind. And the brown folk fix the red-rimmed roads, mow your lawns and clean your house, the service you deserve. The black folks we don't mention because we don't see colour now. For God so loved the world. I drove too far in the wet heat again, driving past a burning car, flames hot gold against black Chevy. Cool green Georgia pines beat silent dark fists where the fire ants crawl, immune to the fevered dust. The end.
Oh, I don't know what to say. Okay, am I ready for the next one, please? I'm glad I'm sitting down. All right, go ahead.
I was scared when I wrote that one. Oh yeah. Wow, yeah, that one scared me. That one, it was and a lot of that was just collected. Like the billboards were ones I drove past, and the black Chevy was something I saw on the 316 highway, which I couldn't get over that the highway was called the 316. You know, for God so loved the world. Yes. And there was this black Chevy on fire. It was not an unusual sight on that highway, and it was just there burning with no one around. And I felt like, I mean, one of the things I loved about Georgia was I felt like it was so steeped in story. Like, I mean, in the other poem I wrote, you know, that when it rains, the roads run red. You know, it was like all the blood of these. Oof. Anyway, yeah. Now
you're going to read it, right? You can't stop there. Read that other poem.
Oh, I can't stop there. I'll go read the other one. Okay, let me find it where it is.
Read that other poem.
The other poem. Okay, Red Clay. All right. This one's called... I'm actually... am I a cynical person? I don't think I am. I just feel things. Okay, this one's called Red Clay, A Song for the South. Very grandiose.
All right.
Oh, there we go. From the Antipodes, from black firm earth, from unending miles of Australian sky, I landed to find red roads, like the land was rusted over, or mad, was going to get even with you one way or another, stranded here with a broken promise. Would a new life leak out? I walked and witnessed, scratched, pocked, humped, rippled veins, these roads, on George's troubled skin, where the blood sings Tara, 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 as the old book goes, gone, with that sweet magnolia wind. I read that book. I smell that wind, sweet and low and a hiss in its breath. I inhale. I have no choice. Red dirt, red. I am far from hell, black volcanic soil, mired in dog dirt, Athens red clay. At crossroads, starved white spires point harsh fingers, scratch blue sky under their nails. Are you redeemed? On white oak winter branches, cardinals, finger prick red, their flushed plumes spatter the quiet trees. Red, white, oak. In another hemisphere, the ironbark survives and thickens. Fiddle-dee-dee, she slants her green eyes, that old South biding her time, antebellum pride. The tour guide murmurs in Madison, the Cobb House, those old fine plantations. Servants, they had servants. But those servants slept 13 to an attic, baked in the heat, close, long, strong heat, like where I'm from, but wet too. It can drown a man, even in an attic. I ask, but another visitor enters, and she can now turn away. Red, that flag on Chevy bumpers, bloated T-shirts and white walls, peeling, red coats, rednecks, turncoats. The South will rise again. So hang that slash diagonal sheet, branded with dagger stars. On the porch, chained chairs sway. Listen, that sweet low wind, Lady Day sings, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Flood at the root of Ford Bridge, 1946. One black man every 40 days, Georgia, from 1882 to 1930, every 40 days. That's what I read. And Georgia, listen, for in my country, the white man poisoned the wells, arsenic in the flour, strychnine in the Christmas pudding. One black man every 40 days under unending sky. Are you redeemed? Here on the porches, sunset peaches suck their warm flailed skin, boiled peaches, pie, cobbler, homemade ice cream. Sweet, oh, summertime, it's easy living under the rich, dark night. Those dagger stars shining as tree frogs sing, cling to the white oak skin, redneck, flailed skin. Ghosts wander red roads under the vellum moon and the haunted sun. Red, black, red. In quiet graves nobody speaks of now. Only perhaps a hushed gesture down the road a ways. You can find them there beneath the pines. Ghosts shudder the dirt. Graves blister the red clay. Are you redeemed? Strange fruit simmers under white gold moon, corn and cotton moon, so sultry she strokes before she bites. Are you redeemed? Stranded here with a broken promise, my sky cast me to where I cannot scratch my initials, an arrow into the red clay. My fingernails still darken with volcanic soil. The yellow moon, the pine winds resined hiss. You're not from these parts. Bless, bless, bless your heart, your red, beating heart. The end.
You included bless your heart. Oh my God!
I sure did.
I had a conversation last night with someone about the meaning of bless your heart and the connotation around it. That's incredible. That was absolutely brilliant. Bless your heart. That was absolutely brilliant. Let me ask you a question, Niki. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Are you ready?
I don't know, but here.
What is the role? Listen, Niki. What is the role of a poet in modern day society?
Ooh. I don't know. Okay, everyone's got a different idea on this. I kind of feel like we have to speak what we see. Mm-hmm. It's like, I think it was Naomi Shahid Nye said, I saw what I saw and it looked like this. And I feel like that's what it is. I saw what I saw and it looked like this. And you're not trying to proclaim, listen, I'm not trying to proclaim, I don't think any poet's trying to proclaim like the truth out there, but this is what I saw from my position, my experience, and this is what it felt like. And here it is. And I think there's a kind of a call and response thing with that. Like, you put it out there, I think, so people can respond to it. Like, oh, I saw this, and it looked like this. There's something about, if we use our voices in this way, and poetry seems to cut through in this different way. It's more like music for me, I think. Mm-hmm. I think it can elicit others to respond and tap into, well, what's my experience? What's my voice? What have I seen? And I think we're just in this world where everyone's just being squashed down all the time and told to shut up or it's going to be really dangerous. And it is dangerous to speak out. It totally is.
Yes, it is.
So I feel like as poets, we've got to do it. We've spent all this time with language and voice. Like, this is, we give our lives to it in lots of ways. So I feel like we've got to be doing that. I think it keeps everything real and human. And it's interesting because when Stalin, I think his first purge was he rounded up the poets. That was the first bunch of people he locked up.
Oh,
wow. There you go. Yeah, that tells you everything right there.
Yes, it does. It does. Well, let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back.
Sure. Okay.
All right, we are back. I am here with Niki Tulk.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, world, to Niki Tulk.
Oh, wow.
All right. Okay. After you had an opportunity to finish your book, all right, then kind of process it and all those things, what did you learn about yourself writing your book? What did you learn about yourself writing your book?
I think I learned I was capable of being truer and more skilled at being true than I thought. I think I was, I had to move through, the self-sabotaging, oh, this isn't very good, oh, this isn't, all that kind of critical self-talk, and just endure and keep going. And I think the fact that I got to the end and I felt like the poems were the most themselves I could make them, and that other people thought they were too and published them, that I thought, oh, okay, mental note to self, follow your integrity and hang in there. And that was what I learned, I think, from this. And pass on to anyone else out there. Hang in there. Keep writing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you think that you were meant to be a poet?
I think I was. I think I still remember the first poem I wrote when I was 5, weirdly. I've forgotten all the other ones, but the first one I ever wrote was really sad. It's really short, and it's very silly, but at the time, it was really meaningful to me, I remember. It was high-stepping horses walking along a big fat row. One went away and thought he would go, and he fell into a rabbit hole, and it started to rain. And I remember I cried after I wrote it, and I just felt like I tapped into something really important. And I think from then on, I just wrote poetry all the time.
Wow. What surprises you most about being a poet?
I think the words keep surprising me. The way they just turn up in these really interesting and odd arrangements when I go to write, so that I feel like the poems themselves are always teaching me new things that language can do. And they they teach me a lot about the way forwards, and they'll arrange themselves in little ways. They'll juxtapose themselves that'll make me feel and hear something completely differently. And so I think the words themselves, surprise me a lot. Yeah.
All right. They say, Niki, that to see the world with complete honesty, one should look to comedians, artists, musicians, and poets. What do you think emerges naturally from your work? What comes from you?
Oh, I think probably a lot of pain, I think.
Okay, all right.
Honestly, I think pain and beauty.
I understand pain, yes. I know it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's, maybe it's, I don't know what you find about this with your work, but I wonder if it's the stuff that we're not allowed to say in public that comes out in the poem. That's what I wonder. Is the stuff that, which can also be big feelings of joy and all that kind of stuff, but I kind of feel like there's this really narrow band of stuff that it's okay to say and do and show when we're kind of out. And then the poetry is all the stuff that's really going on. So I guess whatever it is that we feel we need to give voice to. So,
well,
yeah,
in that same vein, then, is a poem letting your guard down or building a wall.
Oh, I think for me, it's letting my guard down, for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's what's scary, too, like the Georgia poems that I read. Like, wow. I write poetry. I scare myself when I write poetry. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, honestly, as the listener, and I'm sure as the reader, the fact that you were so vulnerable to share your world with the world, I think is so powerful and so important. And I commend you 100%.
Thank you.
100%. Now, if you
much.
had to convince a friend or colleague to read your book, what would you say?
Well, I would say support small presses because they're our ecosystem of the human imagination. So I would put in a plug for that. I think I would just, because I have been asking some colleagues, I haven't asked to read it because I think it would freak them out. But people I've shared it with, I've wanted them to have a sense of the language and the world. And I think I think the book is about something that honestly, child sexual assault is every 9 minutes in this country. A child is assaulted sexually. I mean, it's horrendous. The stats are horrendous. And I feel that there's a way of addressing that in this book that, because a lot of the poems, one of the poems is it was a secretly taped conversation with a state prosecutor that I turned into a poem. So every line in it is something that was said by the system. So there's a lot of, some of it's almost a bit documentary-like, like pulling actual things. And I think it reminds people in a form that I think people can take it, because it's also really imaginative and it slowly sets things up to start thinking about what it is when someone's body is violated and what that means and what the aftermath is, and the deep psychic wounds, the psychic tearing and rupture that happens, and what happens within the wider circle of a family, and how many people are hurt by that. So I feel like the issue is something I am very, very, very passionate about. And I think I'm hopeful that this is another voice in that conversation to help people think about things as they should personally, but mitigating that somehow so they're not getting it as this really horrible, re-traumatizing news report or whatever, but that it can embed it in a more imaginative context, even though some of the poems are very more sort of real. But yeah.
What I like about your work that is not so esoteric that you can't understand it. How important is accessibility? I'm serious. I was hooked on every word. How important is accessibility of meaning? And the question is, should one have to work hard to solve a poem?
Ooh. I kind of feel like, and I mean, maybe because, I've directed Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons in New York. So I spent 2 years with her work, and that I'm going to use her to answer this in a way, because her stuff on one level just when I was given that gig and they said, okay, you have to present the whole poem theatrically, but you can't change anything about the poem. It's got to just run like the poem. And I'm like, yikes. So, but by the end of sitting with it and putting it in breath and bodies and on stage, I thought, this makes total sense. And my kids came to see it. and they were like 12 at the time or something like that. And they were like, we totally get this. And people were saying to me, weirdly, this makes sense. I was like, it does. But no one could quite explain what it was. But, I mean, Stein said if you enjoyed it, you understood it. Like, that's what she used to say. And I think there's this way poetry operates, I think I said, a little bit like music, so that you, I think it's other parts of your brain, like your right brain or something, are tapped into. So even if you couldn't sit down and articulate with analytical words what it was like about per se, there's a whole part of you that resonates with it on some level. And so it's maybe the dream level or something. So I have great belief in that aspect of poetry. And I listen to people read poetry in languages that I don't know. And I feel really profoundly affected by them. And so I think it's that musical element. I have to say my poetry that I don't enjoy is highly intellectual one, where I don't know, where I feel it's like the classic guy, white guy in the turtleneck, black turtleneck at the poetry, going, and hey, here's my poem. There's that sort of poetry, which sounds really kind of bad, but that's a turn off for me, because it just makes me feel less than for some reason. I think you know that guy I'm talking about, don't you?
Yes, I do. Oh,
you know that guy and the poet's voice. Oh.
Well, let me ask you a question. Does knowing that your poems are published and out there validate your being a poet, or are you content knowing they're out of your system?
I think having them published was unbelievably validating, because I think especially because this collection is so vulnerable, and it felt a little bit like walking out in the nudsy nudsies in the middle of, Fifth Avenue going, okay, everyone, have a look and rate me, and it felt a bit like that. And to have the press, like James and Jared at Driftwood Press, have been so gracious and so incredibly encouraging, and just they really get it. And I think even more than the publication, it was them going, oh my goodness, we resonate with this, we want to bring this out to the world. And I think that validated, because I realized, oh yes, this urge that I feel like this is for not just my own self-expression, but this is to meet people out there and to become a part of their lives. I think that made me feel really validated in terms of that impulse, because I realized that you asked earlier, do you write for a reader? And I think, I do. I would be writing poetry, and I have, believe me, I've been, there's that part of it that's not about whether it gets published or not, but when it does and people sort of gel with it, it's a really, really incredible feeling of community. I just feel like I've found new family that I haven't met or something. Like it's like, oh yeah, I'm not floating out there in the ether as this lone little weird person. I have a tribe, and we're together, and we're all fighting the humanity of the world together. So, yes, that's a really long answer, but there you go. That's what you get when you ask me questions.
Right.
Good questions like
Beautiful.
that.
And I want to say, when you mentioned Billie Holiday's song, Strange Fruit, I was floored. Absolutely floored. I really was. Wow.
Yeah.
I think your work is sublime. Absolutely sublime.
Oh,
now,
thank you so much.
Well, we were running out of time, of course, but I want you to share. I want you to share 2 more poems for us, please. Share 2 more.
Sure.
That would make me
2
happy,
more.
and the audience happy.
Okay.
Yes.
All righty. Well, let me just look at the little ones. Oh, I'll read you the one about Gertrude. And then I'll, I'll read you. They're not the happiest ones, but they do give you a little sense of the other one. Okay. One's about Gertrude. So a little bit of background for people who aren't up to speed on their Hamlet, which is fine. But Gertrude is Hamlet's mum. And when Ophelia dies, we don't see that. That happens off stage, and the only person who knows what happened was Gertrude, was Hamlet's mum, and she rushes in and says, "Oh my goodness, this is how it happened." And she gives this blow-by-blow detailed account. And as I was deep diving into Hamlet, I was thinking, how did she know? How did she know how Ophelia died? And was she there? Did she push her? Did she not rescue her? Like, what happened? And that echoed a lot the mother in the story, who feels like she wasn't able to protect or blames herself for what happened to the daughter. So there felt like this weird connection. So anyway, this is about Gertrude. Gertrude was a false mother. Gertrude, ribbed in blue, sleek ship of war, girl plunderer. She will not forget it was you, oh, you, the maid who made him mad, her son's stockings at his ankles, his eyes glazed and wary, his kisses pained and bloodthirsty. He brought ghosts into his mother's bed. She watched while they stole your shoes. Your voice hung on metal pins, dangling tunes of cock and maidens and rue, half-rasped, hey, nonny, nonny. She rang the bell. She locked her eyes. The door was open. The sky bent close. The wind was right. The grass was wet. The birds said the moon had gone. She failed to pull loudly at your dress. She should have pulled loudly at your dress, louder than the willow. Come down, come home, dinner is on the table. The bed turned, bath full and hot. Climb into my lap, my dear child. Abhor the willow, the winding sheet of long purples. Gertrude, ribbed in blue, watched from the hedgerow. Set the hounds at your heels, the troll under the bridge. The end.
Wow.
So that is Gertrude. Yes.
Okay. All right.
And then this one is written from the Little O series. The investigation is closed, said the police. I'm a smart person, said the prosecutor. I don't have time, said the big white gruff voice that wore a gun at his hip and a pen in his chest. So I argued with the prosecutor. That is what mothers do. But what about the nightmares? All children have nightmares, he said. Do you have a recipe for this then? I inquired, most politely, the anger prickling ants hot under the skin. I will not stoop so low as to make my voice like him, this big, gruff, white, angry voice. Do not tempt him to loosen the gun at his hip, to put his hand down there. I asked so nicely, so like a nice young mother, so nice. So please, sir, if it's no bother, so if I can spare 2 minutes of your time, you're busy, so many important matters to attend to, reports to make, files to find, guns to polish, nice rich white boys to streets to patrol, skins to find, phone calls to make. Do you have a recipe for this? How to stop her charging across a busy road when she sees a boy? How to stop her avoiding children? How not to dream awake? How not to hear voices? How to not hold knives at her chest, how to not throw off the covers and run through the house and play the piano all loud and crash jangle when the smaller ones sleep and the moon is up and I can't remember, and how not to sit up and sing over and over with eyes closed and voice the dusty chant of dream when he raped me, when he put his here, then, over, 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 over. He's a busy, busy man. There is a lot of work for gruff white men with guns to do. All children have nightmares, he said. The end.
Wow. Wow.
Oof.
Let me sit here for a second. I need to sit for a second, just for a second.
Yeah, you sit for a
just
second.
For a second.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Mhm.
Mhm. Wow. Sadly, Niki, we've reached the end of our poetic journey together.
Oh.
I'm really sad.
I'm so
I really
sad.
am.
I knew we'd go over. When we spoke a few moments before we I thought, no, no. That ain't going to happen.
Where can listeners find and your other work as well? Where can they find your work?
Sure. They can find my work if they go to Driftwood Press, so DRIFTWOOD, driftwoodpress.com. They can find my book there, and I would encourage them to buy it, and also just to support Driftwood Press, which are an amazing little press. They do beautiful work. So there's a bunch of other really cool books there to get to, and yeah, that's where I would go. Quick.
Okay. How can listeners stay in touch?
Yes, they can go to my website and send me an email, and my website is www.nikitulk.com, and you can go there and find out a bit more about the other stuff I do, and send me an email if you want to play, talk, ask questions. Absolutely, I'm all about the back and forth conversation, as you've heard tonight. So yes, be in touch.
All right. What's next for you? Where do you go from here?
Well, I am working on another book. I spent 2 years living out in Allegheny County, which is in the wild west of Western New York State, and it was a really crazy place, and I was surrounded by semi-automatic gunfire often. There was shrines to a certain president all over the place. There was a lot of stuff that went down, and I felt like there's a lot I'm processing from that. There was a lot of really interesting people, really interesting stories and stuff going on with the land. So I'm actually working on a book of poems about that experience of living there in that particular landscape. And it's at the moment called Lot's Wife. So
wow. Lot's Wife.
Stay tuned.
Wow.
Lot's Wife. Yeah. So that looking back and turning to salt and all sorts of things in Allegheny County.
All right. You know, I'm kind of glad that I kind of flubbed up in the beginning, because nothing's perfect. Life is not perfect, but we keep moving like we did tonight. We continue on with our journey, and it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You know, to me, you are a poetic star on the horizon.
So coming from you, that is really, really so generous and kind. Thank you so much. It really has been an honor to talk with you.
Well, I try not to lie. You are. You are. It's just... You are. I don't know what else to say. You're fantastic.
I'm taking those words. I am taking those words. I'm receiving those words.
All right.
You. Thank you,
yes.
sir. Yes.
Accept them, yes.
Absolutely.
All right, good people. We've come to the end. Niki Tulk, her new book is on Driftwood Press. Wow. I'm just going to say goodbye. And as I share every week, let poetry ring somewhere throughout the land. Take care, everybody, and be safe. All right. Bye, Niki.
Amen. Bye. Thank you.
Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio, is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also check out the website at qlpor.com.
Great. Thank you.